Allan Brooks' story is inspirational in a way as well, because in his early years, he didn't receive any success. He persevered in it, and then he became one of the most notable wildlife artists in the country.
And that bothers people these days, that when they see someone who just started painting at 15 and they're phenomenal, or started playing hockey at 12 and they're phenomenal, and their kids were 4 when they first tied on skates. I mean, he had it in him, he just didn't know until he tried it.
Welcome to Vernon Visionaries. I'm your host, Peter Kaz. Today we embark on a journey through the life of one of Canada's most remarkable naturalists and artists, the one and only Allan Brooks. His legacy lives in the vivid illustrations and paintings that capture the essence of the Okanagan's wildlife. But who was Allan Brooks, and how did he become the artist and ornithologist we celebrate today? Let's head over to the Vernon Museum and Archives and uncover some of his story and see some of the breathtaking artwork firsthand.
Gwen, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Peter. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. This is an amazing place. Thanks for
absolutely.
giving us the room exclusively here so we can film this.
Wonderful, yeah.
Chatting with you for a long time now, like you're one of the foremost Allan Brooks knowledgeable people here in town. I remember when we were filming something else prior with you that we went into the archives, which is your den, and just the history in there. To me, that's like my favorite room. And not just the museum, but anywhere I go when we're talking about history, I'm like, oh, you got to go to the archives in the Vernon Museum. It's just phenomenal in there. Because you can, when I was a kid, I had encyclopedias. I'm old. It was before Google. And if you wanted to see something, you'd have to find the letter that it starts with, pull it out, go through the pages, and you only had one, maybe you're lucky, 2 photos, but the rest was just, info text. Here, I feel like that's what you have. You can pull out like not just information about someone, but their personal artifacts or something that they handwritten. It's fascinating. So you do have a lot of stuff on Allan Brooks in here.
Yes, and it is definitely a little bit like going back in time in the archives, which is wonderful.
And how did you acquire everything?
Well, the Allan Brooks Fonds, so Fonds is a French term that refers to a record group related to one person or one organization. We acquired it in a variety of manners. Mostly it was donated by the daughter of Oliver Wells, Oliver Wells was a very good friend of Allan Brooks. Some of the materials in the Allan Brooks Fonds are particularly rare and were actually purchased by the organization. Now, we are a not-for-profit, and most of the material we acquire, whether that's in the archives or in our collection, our artifact collection, is donated. We don't have a huge budget for acquisitions, but when it comes to particularly historically significant materials, we will purchase. And the Allan Brooks journal, which we will be looking at, was deemed precious enough that we were able to purchase it in 2007 from Sydney Williams' granddaughter, and that was another friend of Allan Brooks.
Wow. So he still has lots of roots in town.
Yes.
Does he have direct family here in town?
He does not have direct family in town. He did have a son, Allan Brooks Jr., but they do not live in town anymore.
Are there any notable stories that you have of Allan Brooks from his time here?
Yes, there are quite a few notable stories about Allan Brooks. He was a little bit of a character.
Was he a jokester? What do you mean a character?
Well, he had a dry sense of humor,
Okay.
I've heard. He wasn't a particularly romantic man. In 1926, he married Marjorie Brooks, and he was quoted as saying that he felt marriage was kind of a biological imperative more than, a choice. But I think in Marjorie, he did find a perfect lifelong partner, as she was also said to have been accepting of birdmen in general and of Allan Brooks in particular. So they kind of had an equal
Understanding.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of my favorite stories.
And I noticed, we've talked to a lot of people here before we started this docuseries that we're going to end up meeting. And a lot of people had stories about him, favorite stories and such, but there's a lot of people that are going to teach us what it was like being him in his shoes. Before we did that, we wanted to come here where that's the holy grail of everything. My favorite room is the archives, which I mentioned. We're going to go in there later. But you did start off here a gallery, an Allan Brooks gallery. Is this new items that you acquired, or is this paintings that you've had from back in the day?
Yeah, so the paintings we've had for quite some time. Most of them were either acquired or donated over the years. So it's a collection that's built up gradually. The Vernon Museum actually has the largest publicly accessible display of Allan Brooks paintings in the world. Yeah. There are private collectors who have examples of Allan Brooks' work in their possession, but they aren't visible to the public in the way that our collection is.
But he made a living, obviously, off his paintings. He must have sold a ton of paintings to make a living off.
Yeah, there's about 1,800 Allan Brooks paintings
in the world somewhere.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. He also made a living as a taxidermist and mounting specimens, especially in the early days before his artwork was really gaining notoriety. That's how he made his living, was mounting those taxidermied specimens and sending them to museums around Canada.
And maybe that was a way for him to get close and personal to certain birds that he liked, that he wanted to paint.
Yes.
So he can see all the... Okay.
Correct. Allan Brooks was known to paint birds feather by feather. So he did need that level of detail to be able to capture their realism. And in later years, in 2001, when he was recognized as a person of national historical significance by the Canadian government, this ceremony was presented by Robert Bateman, who was another celebrated wildlife artist. And he actually said that he considered Allan Brooks to be one of the most realistic painters of birds in Canada. And coming from a fellow artist, this was quite the accolade.
And what was the biggest ask that he ever had? Was it to do a cover of a magazine or a book or anything in the U.S.? I think I read somewhere where someone approached him in the U.S. was it a wildlife magazine, where the gentleman in the U.S. that used to draw birds, who was his counterpart, I think passed away, so they went to Allan to do the cover of a famous magazine.
Was that of National Geographic?
It was National Geographic, but I thought there was another one as well.
He did a few.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.
So he was that popular. That's the thing.
He was very popular.
He was that popular.
Yes.
And was he living in Vernon at that time when he did National Geographic?
He was. Yes, he was.
Because going back, let's start with his history first of all. He was born in India.
That's correct. He was born in India in 1869. He was then sent to England when he was 4 years old. His father was working as a civil engineer in India, but they felt that he would receive better training in England, so he was sent there, as was the tradition at the time.
Yes.
And he was exposed to a number of celebrated naturalists while he was in England. In 1881, the family came to Canada because Allan Brooks's mother, Mary, was in ill health, and they thought that the climate here in Canada would be more conducive to her recovery.
That's why I moved to Vernon, actually.
Unfortunately, she didn't end up recovering and did pass away shortly after they arrived in Quebec. At this point, Allan Brooks's father, William, was now a widower with 5 children, so he moved the family to Ontario and started a farmstead there. And he didn't know anything about running a farmstead, but he had a family to support, and his sons, including Allan Brooks, were made to kind of help him with the living. Allan Brooks was very interested in the natural world, but less so in painting, especially when he was growing up. I think when he got older, he developed a bit more of an appreciation for art's sake alone. But especially when he was young, he kind of considered it a means to an end. It was a way for him to be able to capture his knowledge about the natural world. His attention to detail is reflected in his paintings, but especially, like I said, in the early years, he more used it as a vessel than as a, as a pastime.
And that bothers people these days, that when they see someone who just started painting at 15 and they're phenomenal, or started playing hockey at 12 and they're phenomenal, and their kids were 4 when they first tied on skates. I mean, he had it in him, he just didn't know until he tried it, and it was just a natural talent.
Absolutely, and I think Allan Brooks' story is inspirational in a way as well, because in his early years, he was painting and creating artwork, but he didn't receive any success really until
notoriety.
Notoriety until about 1906. So, he was already a grown adult by the time he was receiving praise for his artwork. He persevered in it, and then he became one of the most notable wildlife artists in the country.
And like anyone that's from Asia or Europe that's moving to Canada, they start off east. Eventually he worked his way through the west.
That's correct, yes. The family moved from Ontario to Chilliwack, where Allan Brooks was able to explore Sumas Lake. Was one of his favorite spots to visit, where he could study a variety of waterfowl species. Sumas Lake, incidentally, is now filled in, and it's part of the Fraser Lowland, but at the time he was visiting it, it was a lake. In later years, William Brooks eventually moved back to Ontario, but Allan Brooks decided to stay in BC and to explore. Again, he was at this point making his living with taxidermy and mounting specimens to send to museums. And it wasn't until actually 1905 that he settled in the Okanagan Landing in Vernon. So, yeah, he explored the province quite a bit before he set down roots here.
That's like a lot of us. Yeah. When you find the Okanagan, you can't leave.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's walk in here and take a look at some of the paintings, and I think there might even be some that he did when he was living here in Vernon.
Absolutely.
I'll let you go in first.
Thank you.
So we're in the Allan Brooks Gallery.
That's right.
I love this.
Yeah.
It's like an intimate location where you actually get to get up close and personal, and I love that there's actual photos of the man himself.
That's correct,
the legend.
yes.
The photos of him there obviously is when he lived here in Vernon, because he was older when he lived here in Vernon.
Yeah.
It wasn't when he was any younger. That's when he was living everywhere else, because he's traveled the world. You have a lot of paintings here. The one thing I do notice a lot of his paintings is most of them are the same size. Like, I guess back in the day, there was only a certain size of canvas you can buy.
That's correct, yes. So he was sort of limited in his size availability, but as you can see, not in his subject.
No, everything's different as well. And there's landscape, which I got to understand later, because everyone thinks right away he's just birds, but
Correct.
no, I mean, he's got beautiful landscapes.
That's correct,
And-
yes. Our curator has purposely put up the paintings in a way to represent, there was this one facet of his artistic side, which was painting birds and other animals, and that's what he's particularly known for, but indeed, he was a landscape artist as well.
Do you have a favorite that's in here?
I do have a favorite, actually. It's probably the one right behind you here, which is titled Taking Flight.
Taking Flight, I love it.
It's undated, but Allan Brooks did have a particular interest in waterfowl and ducks, as seen in the painting here. Interestingly, with Allan Brooks, when he was a younger man, he was a big game hunter. So he would hunt large animals. He eventually stopped this, but he continued to hunt waterfowl even into his old age. So he had both a love for ducks, but also a hunting tendency. So
That's a good segue of what he did when he was in the Army.
That's right.
Because when he was a sniper.
That's correct. Allan Brooks served.
This is where he got his
World War I.
experience.
Correct. Yes, he, as a big game hunter, that skill set translated into his service in World War I.
And it wasn't just big game hunting. He was also anything that he didn't want to see on his land.
Yeah.
He would just hunt them. And apparently even his neighbors would call him and say, "There's whatever it might be we don't want to see in our land.
Yeah.
Can you come and get rid of of it.
Yeah, so Allan Brooks is a bit of a nuanced historical figure, as is any naturalist that was...
multifaceted.
Correct, that's a great word. That was kind of inspired by the Edwardian and Victorian ethos of the day. So there was a number of theories of naturalism that were around during Allan Brooks's time. There was one which we're probably more familiar with today, which is the kind of balance of nature ideal, where if a certain species is becoming more prevalent or outcompeting other species, we tend to leave them alone, other than in instances of, say, an invasive species. But Allan Brooks was opposed to this. He was actually an interventionist. So he thought that predators were less reserved than we might think, and that they needed to be controlled in order to allow other preyed upon species to flourish. And so on his property in the Okanagan Landing, he would rid it of crows, squirrels, any other marauding animals that he thought were a threat to his songbird species. And while this idea might run counter to what we think of as naturalism today, it was effective because Allan Brooks's property at one point had the most biodiversity of songbirds in Canada and the United States. So it obviously was effective, even if it might not sit as well with our ideas of naturalism today.
Jumping right to the end here real quick before we jump into the special room. I love the archives. I can't wait till we go in there. What is his legacy? How are people remembering Allan Brooks, and what has he done for the environment, for taxidermy, for painting, all the things that he's done? What do you think is his legacy?
I think Allan Brooks has quite a complex legacy, actually. I think, of course, he's remembered for his artistic contributions to...
And I think people remember him as this because it's in our face. It's tangible. It's something that we can all look at.
Yeah.
So right away they think he was just an artist.
But I think the other side to Allan Brooks is his naturalism. And, through his lifetime, Allan Brooks did discover a number of species which he was able to document and send this information along to repositories that were collecting this kind of information. I know he discovered a colony of pigeons, for instance, and he recorded this information and sent it along. So there's both Allan Brooks's artistic contributions as well as his research, his studying, his notes that he collected through this long journey of naturalism.
He had a lot of titles. He had he was an artist, he was a taxidermist, he was a naturalist. There's just so much that he did.
Yeah, he was also a lieutenant colonel when he left World War I in 1919. So, many titles.
And then, right to the end, his last day, he was living here in Vernon. Did he pass away here in Vernon?
I don't think he was in Vernon when he passed away, but in 1945, in December of 1945, I believe he was at his second home. They had, the family had properties in the Lower Mainland as well. So they would winter in the Lower Mainland and then spend the summer up here in the Okanagan at the Landing. But yeah, in 1945, in December, he finished up 3 commissioned paintings for the State College of Washington. And immediately after signing them, he checked himself into hospital. And he then passed away in early January of 1946, on January 3rd. So yeah, he was working right to the end.
No, it's just incredible. So in the archives right now, you've already pre-pulled some stuff for us, but I'm really excited to get in there. So let's finish off this episode.
That sounds great.
Let's go check it out.
Allan Brooks wasn't just a painter, he was a storyteller, capturing the beauty and intricacy of nature with every brushstroke. Seeing his art up close and personal was like stepping into his own world, where science and creativity meet. Next time, we'll go deeper into his life as we delve into his personal journals and photographs, revealing a side of Allan Brooks you've never seen before. So stay curious, kids, and I'll see you then.